Oh my god, I didn't expect to see you here. My name is Adam Clery. Welcome back to Trek Culture. Come in, take a seat, wherever you like, except there. Obviously, that would be a bit weird. Anyway, by the time you watch this video, you should have Star Trek Lower Decks all up in your eyes, your ears, wherever the hell else you like to put TV shows. That's none of my business. And while we're on the subject, you should, of course, obviously also have Star Trek Lower Decks Ups and Downs, my show, where we go through the whole thing and talk about what was good and what was also quite good. But I mean, if you haven't, it's no big deal. Not bothered at all. Anyway, on the assumption you have at least seen the episode, then you will know the entire vibe of the show is, hello, we're big Star Trek nerds. Would you like to come and see our show about being a big Star Trek nerd? You won't believe all the Star Trek nerdery we've managed to stuff into it. And despite being only 23 minutes long, they have packed 64, I think, years worth of nostalgia and history and lore and everything that has made Star Trek great into the backgrounds and into the script and into the makeup and into every little tiny pore and molecule that makes up this show. Thus, What Culture Gonna What Culture, we've done a fantastic article, and we're going to do one every single week about all the Easter eggs, all the references, everything that is in this show. And we thought, you know what? Video that also. So that's it, that's the premise, that's the whole introduction. Big up my boy Paul Sutherlin, who was writing these things, and my god, are they detailed, because my name is Adam Clery and this is every single Easter egg and hidden reference from Star Trek Lower Decks Episode 1, Second Contact. So yes, Second Contact begins with the most Star Trek image imaginable, a planet in space with a giant space station and spaceships flying all around it. Points there. Now this is of course an Earth-style space dock first seen in Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, but then also in Star Trek 4, Star Trek 5, and then reused as stock footage time and time again in certain episodes of The Next Generation, and one was even seen being constructed in Star Trek Discovery. The designs of these things, certainly from the outside, hasn't changed much throughout the history of Star Trek, and we see one here. And as well as that, there are 3 starships flying around it, which is a slight other nod to other Star Trek shows, because there's only actually 2 starships flying around it in terms of design. It's just that one of them is flipped upside down. And Star Trek, of course, has a rich, long history of filling out space scenes with just slightly adapted other models. We finally get our first proper look at the USS Cerritos, a California class starship, which is interesting because Cerritos is apparently a place in California. Anyway, I digress, and we get to see for the first time just how many design hallmarks it has that relate to the Enterprise D from The Next Generation. Now yes, while the overall design is very different and the warp nacelles have a fresh new look, the saucer section and the deflector dish are near identical to a Galaxy-class starship. But as my good pal and yours Marcus learned on his How to Kill an Hour podcast when he interviewed Mike McMahon himself, there is a big yellow stripe on this ship which is supposed to work the same way the coloured uniforms do in Starfleet. This, the Cerritos, is an engineering support ship, thus it has a big yellow thing on it. Right, this is the first big proper treasure trove of stuff we get in this episode. Ensign Mariner, she has a big box full of shore leave contraband, and my god, what good contraband it is. First off, there is a bottle of Saurian brandy, originally seen in the original series, but also crops up in Star Trek Picard as well, and also a Glavin, the big, you know, the glove with the big wrecking ball on it from Code of Honor that everybody hated. There is also a bottle of Romulan whiskey, which she notes is weirdly blue, unlike everything else about the entire Romulan aesthetic, which is green. But the funnest thing in this entire scene is, of course, the bat'leth. Not the redesigned, reworked, janky one we've seen in other series, the proper Next Generation style, 2 hooks and mean little pincers bat'leth. Interestingly though, she says she got this from an old man with an eye patch, which could be a reference to General Martok, but I will have to hold my hands up here and say that if your entire culture revolves around stabby weapons and how much you swing them around, there's probably a lot of Klingons who are missing an eye. Still though. Then of course we get the opening credits, and these are pretty much an ode to every single Star Trek series in one way or another. First off, there are little nods to both the original series and The Next Generation in the music itself. It takes little musical cues from both of those, but also it looks a lot like Voyager in part, this, where it's flying around and then stuff just goes wrong. There's a very similar black hole to one that appeared in Star Trek Discovery, and it's not exactly a hidden reference or subtle thing, but the Romulans fighting the Borg, it's just the Romulans fighting the Borg. That could be a reference to Picard, who knows. Into the shuttle bay now, and we continue the Californian theme by having all of these shuttlecraft, themselves a little tweak on the old Voyager Type 6, being named after national parks in California. There is the Redwood, the Death Valley, the Joshua Tree, and the Yosemite. Oh, and what have we got here? It's Starfleet's first ever Sikh officer. That's a nice touch and goes really well with the uniform. Alright, now if you know your Star Trek aliens, then Lower Decks was a veritable funfair ride of ooh, 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 and ooh. I mean, where to begin with this? Well, aside from the human crew, we had an Orion, obviously, and there was a Benzite, yes, spotted that, and a Bolian. They're always good. There was a Vulcan, one of those there. Someone who looked vaguely a bit Klingon. There was an Andorian. There was a Trill. There was a Bajoran. And just on the off chance I forgot any there was also a...
Cetacean Doctor.
Great little spot this. Somebody actually had one of the Geordie LaForge style visors in this episode, which is kind of weird because it would have been slightly outdated because at this point in the timeline, Geordie's has ocular implants, but still retro fashion. No reason that can't be a thing in the future. Don't know if this was just me, but did anybody else think that banana hot was a reference to tea, Earl Grey hot? Just me? And as well as all the engineering tools in this scene being straight out of B'Elanna Torres, Chief O'Brien, and Geordie's own personal little kit seen in every single episode you care to mention, Mariner's also firing a Type 2 phaser into her own hand, which I didn't really get. Now, the uniforms were quite interesting because while they are an entirely new creation, they do bear certain resemblances to Trek uniforms of old, specifically the kind of midway flashback scenes we saw in Picard. They look a little bit like those. But again, according to my pal and yours, Big Mike, apparently what this is trying to say is that Starfleet is so big and it changes its uniforms so often that sometimes designs don't even make it across the entire fleet before they're phased out. There's every chance no other ship ever had this, or that every other ship has already had this and got rid of it. Nobody really knows because they change their uniforms that often, but either way, I like it. Alright, so the map of the ship is in itself a bit of an Easter egg because it's a lovely return to the LCARS, LCARS, whatever you want to call it, designs of 24th century Star Trek shows. You know the ones, them cutaways, they were in The Next Generation, they were in Voyager, they were in Deep Space Nine, but we've not really seen any of them since. Here is a lovely, great big whopping one of the USS Cerritos, and it's full of fun things. Now, we actually already pulled apart the little bits of this we'd already seen in the things we learned from the trailer video all the way back whenever the hell we recorded that, but one thing we didn't see at the time, which we're delighted about, is Cetacean Ops. Now, as everybody knows, Cetacean Ops is our favourite part of a starship here at Trek Culture, as it is the department where dolphins and whales work with their human colleagues to solve complex navigational problems or language translation issues, which has been talked about, referenced, and made canon, but never actually seen on a Star Trek episode. Will we get to see it in Lower Decks? My pants will come off if so. Rutherford, he's got a thingy, he's like a cyborg implant in his head. Something bad happened to him. I really want to know what, and they've given him this thing to sort him out, but it's got a Vulcan chip in it, or it was made by Vulcan, so every now and then it just massively suppresses his emotional responses to things. And did you notice? It gives him one Vulcan ear as a result. This thing was not built for humans to wear. Now again, this isn't exactly a hidden reference, but the look of the corridors and the general aesthetic of the ship is supposed to be, again, referencing both The Next Generation and Voyager, and indeed all the sound effects, all the background noises were pulled directly from those shows. Go and just watch the tour they give her. Again, just turn the volume up. It sounds like you are watching those shows all over. They just get it, don't they? They just get what we want. There are bunks on the Cerritos, which I think I'm right in saying is the first time we've seen those on a starship since The Undiscovered Country. The junior officers on that were depicted as having to share living quarters, and they're next to the sonic showers, which we only ever saw once in Star Trek Voyager. They use like noise or just particles or something to scrub the dirt off your skin. No water required, which is why it's weird that the place gets a bit steamy. A Star Wars reference for you now, and Boimler mentions that sand is terrible and it gives him a rash and stuff, and that is pretty much a joke at Anakin Skywalker's expense, which had me howling. Tendi then uses it to go back to Orion, and do you know what? Fair flips, that's a fairly accurate representation if you go back to the original series episode, The Cage, and how it was depicted in parts of Discovery. That's pretty much what Orion looks like, yes. This isn't so much a reference, but the fact that Mariner then pulls up her own holodeck program, which is the all-nude Olympic training facility thingy, finally addresses what people would actually use holodecks for in real life. Freeman's ready room now, and like any self-respecting Starfleet captain, she has a shelf First off, there's a Californian flag on her wall, which of course plays into this whole thing that the Cerritos is named after a place in California, and it's a California-class starship, and all the shuttlecraft are named after national parks. It's like being in a Red Hot Chili Peppers song, this. But she's also got a big cap on there, like the one Captain Pike had in the cage, and I think I'm right in saying was kind of worn by Kirk and Spock in Into Darkness. She's also got an ammonite on her wall, which is like reminiscent of the ammonite that Picard had. It's not exactly subtle. There's a model of her own ship, fair enough. Some kind of award from Starfleet, fair enough. A sextant, which I'm reliably informed is what that's actually called, and a baseball in the most loving ode to Starfleet's best ever captain, Benjamin Sisko, I have ever seen. And there's also a sword, and I'm convinced there's a big meaning behind this sword, and I just can't quite think what it is. Anybody? Comments? Anybody? Into the bar now, and that's quite good because not only are there martini olives going through the Starfleet insignia, very good, I see what you did there, but the uniforms being worn by the staff are the same ones from the Star Trek The Next Generation episode, Lower Decks. Hey, boom. You remember Ben? Just Ben from that episode? Same clobber. That's why you're watching this video, for stuff like that. Dune buggies. In this episode, there was 2 on the Master Systems display, and they take them down to the planet as well, and this is just basically them trying to say, do you remember that Dune buggy we had in Nemesis, the Argo? Well, that was brilliant, even if you thought it was dumb, so look, we're going to have a load more of them. Great. Mwah. Chef's kiss. During the, let's call it, misadventure on the planet, several Starfleet regulations are quoted, and I couldn't remember them off the top of my head. 498, 756, 25, 15, 48, and 76. We're pleased to say, having looked these up, that none of them have ever been used in an episode of Star Trek before. Some of them relate to illegal sale of arms and equipment to alien races, and others just refer to pointing a phaser at a fellow officer. Good work there. Very small on this, but when Rutherford and Barnes decide to take a walk across the deck of the saucer section, this is a direct reference to Star Trek First Contact, where Picard, Hawk, and Worf decide to take a walk under the saucer section. It ends remarkably better for them than it did for Hawk. Also declaring their love for the classical band The Monkees is up there with Kirk et al. Declaring their love for classical band Beastie Boys, and it's designed to make us feel really stupid and living in the past. Might be my favourite one of the whole episode, this, because after Boilmer's done getting suckled on by the giant milky spider cow thingy, Mariner tells him it's fine, the Doctor will just run a light over it, referencing the fact that every single medical instrument in Star Trek history is just a light that goes over you and everything is magically fixed. It makes sense to me that if that was reality, that is precisely what everybody would call it. Haha! Still, that is nothing compared to the time they used a light-up vegetable peeler in Voyager. Gotta get me one of those. And then in the episode's finale, we just get this, like, music festival of Star Trek trivia lore dumped right into our eyes, but specifically that Mariner is going to take Boilmer on as her Chadulched. The Klingon's a bit rusty, but I think that's how you say it. That's a reference to the Star Trek The Next Generation episode, Sins of the Father, in which Picard and Worf, one of them was going to be the other's Chadulch. Just to really quickly wrap all of these up, we get references to Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, and Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, in terms of fighting Khan and searching for Spock, respectively. Sulu being the sword guy, referencing both the Abrams verse and the time he had a sword in the original series. Gary Mitchell, what an out there obscure shout, one of the original crew from the original pilot of the original series. And best of all, Troy's banging bod and how she used to have to wear a jumpsuit. I love this show! Right, so I think that is every single Easter egg, reference, nudge, wink, nod, suggestion, hint, clue, anything that celebrates what it is to be a big old fan of Star Trek in this show, which is itself one big celebration of what it is to be a big old fan of Star Trek. But if you saw any of your own, if we missed any, let us know in the comments below. And while you're here, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching. I have, of course, been Adam Cleary. It's 24 degrees in this flat, and I am melting, but I'll still see you soon. Goodbye.